Welcome back to the Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and for business. I tell you, we're in a new year, and so it's a great opportunity to spend some time about thinking about business and thinking about your business. And I'd like to bring Marc Krasney on. He's a regular contributor on the program, and he talks about legal issues with the Krasney Law Firm. That's Krasney, Krasney, lawfirm.com. Love getting you on, Marc. How are you, sir?
Doing all right, Kevin. How are you?
Doing great. Really exciting new year. Very, very cool things happening. And I loved the suggested topic that you brought to the table. First of all, there's just an incredible number of people that are that own their own business, and I kind of use quotation marks when I say that which is hard to convey on radio, as you well know. But they have this entity that they do exchanges from, they do business with, but they're finding themselves prohibitively taxed, and they're kind of trying to operate under the radar screen, and it'll make their lives really stressful doing it this way. And the reality is a lot of their problems could be solved with a proper business entity. Isn't that true?
That's exactly right. And I think a lot of times in January, people are ready and excited to get back into the business, really start growing it and creating things. And what I typically see when I get a phone call or a meeting with a client is sort of like what you just said. Hey, we started a business. I have a DBA, and my DBA's been out there. I've been in business for a year. I just want to talk about, structuring. And, of course, we sit down and I explain what a DBA really is. And, frankly, all that means is you, say Kevin Price, goes out and gets a DBA for radio show. Well, great. All that really means is that you get to operate a business instead of calling yourself Kevin Price. It's radio show. There really aren't that many protections that go along with it. You're taxed under your own Social Security number. And so really the DBA doesn't get much other than to allow you to do business as that name. And so
it's cheap. It's cheap, and so are the benefits.
yeah, good way to put it. And so I sit down with the clients and say, now explain to me what you do. Do you make widgets? Do you provide a service? What exactly is it you do? And then we discuss long-term plans, strategies, and then we start talking about entities. And that's where clients get a little bit scared because they don't really know, or they've seen things online, they've done searches, they look at LegalZoom, or, this is what I don't like, they talk to their friends, and their friends in Nevada or their friend in New York or somewhere. Well, all of these entity choices are governed by state law. And so unless you really talk to someone in Texas, preferably a lawyer, who knows these entities, I'm not too concerned what other states do. And so when I sit down with the client, I say, what do you want to do? What's the goal? What's the strategy? And we look at the entity, choices, and we pick one. And it's, anything from a corporation to an LLC, and a limited partnership, those kind of things. Or we decide perhaps just doing a DBA is just fine.
Right, because but most cases, wouldn't you agree, where a DBA is just fine, it's probably their entity is really little more than a hobby that provides a little bit of income. Because if you're getting serious enough income, you're going to want to protect that, and you're also getting enough liability and risk that you're going to want to protect yourself.
Exactly. I think if you pattern your business as a hobby, you're probably right. Setting up an assumed name for your company is probably just fine. You made a few $1,000s on it, and it's no big deal to put that into your personal tax return. But if you have a company that's selling a service or a widget, and you're getting bigger, and you're getting into the selling $50,000 a year or $100,000 a year, and you see vendors out there or customers or some potential liability where the entity might be sued, we want to protect personal assets from company assets, and we do that by setting up an entity. We give birth to a new structure. That structure gets a tax ID number. That structure has liabilities separate from you personally.
Yeah, no question about it. So to give a real quick overview of the various ones, you mentioned them in passing, but let's talk with the one that you think is most common, particularly for small businesses.
I think right now most people like the idea of a limited liability company. And really what that does effectively is give you the liability protections of a corporation where only that entity, so long as you've observed the corporate formalities, would get sued or at least have liability. And then it has the tax benefits of a partnership, where more or less it's a pass-through. And so if the entity makes $50,000 or $100,000, that money is passed through to the personal return depending upon the ownership structure. So the LLC specifically doesn't pay a tax. The owners of that LLC would pay it on their return, so you're not taxed twice. Unlike a corporation, a Class C, a subsection C corporation would get taxed twice. First at the corporate level, and then at the shareholder level whenever distribution or the like is taken.
Okay. And then another one we hear a lot about is just a simple corporation. Talk a little bit about that.
A simple corporation is what I would refer to as a C Corp. And a C Corp under the IRS code is much like your big companies out there. It's a big entity, liability protections, it's taxed, and then when it actually makes distributions to shareholders, those are taxed. So effectively, that owner who owns the corporation or its share of a corporation is taxed at the corporate level and at the shareholder level. And most of the big entities, like I said, are at that level. You can also do in a corporation a subsection F, which is an election in the IRS code, that allows for similar protections of the corporation or the exact same protections of a corporation, but on a tax basis, it's a pass-through to the shareholders. There's some other little magic in there, things you have to do, meet, and reports to file, but effectively it allows for taxation once.
We got about a minute left before I let you go. Any final thoughts?
Well, the other thing that people like to do is talk about their entity and say they've gotten bigger. Say this, radio show we set up as a partnership. And say you call me and say, well, I want to find 10 investors. Well, those 10 investors, I don't really want to be a manager or have any powers in the entity to run it, but I need their money and they want to get paid back. And that's really the structure for partnerships. So, for example, I want to invest in your radio show. You're going to set up a partnership. I would make you a general partner or some entity a general partner, and then each of those people or companies that want to invest into the radio show entity give money, and they get in return partnership value up to that amount of money they've invested. And it's a protection both for the partner, because they're only liable up to the amount they invested, and the general partner is the one that gets to make the decisions and run it. So they don't have to wait for input from limited partners. That's a great structure when you want investors and you want the autonomy to run the management of the entity.
Marc Krasney is our guest. He's a regular contributor on The Price of Business. You can learn more about him at KrasneyLawFirm.com. That's KRASNEY lawfirm.com. Thanks so much, Marc.
Thank you.
By the way, this interview, you're going to find that over at US Daily Review, as well, of course, at priceofbusiness.com. Make sure you check it both out. This is going to have great circulation value, I can tell, because these are tough questions people ask every time, this time of year it appears. So we'll be covering that and more at usdailyreview.com. More after this.
Oh, let the sun beat down upon my face.